What if I told you that one photograph, just one, could change everything you thought you knew about the world? What if that photo, which seems like a harmless piece of history, is actually a doorway to something far darker, something that should never been discovered? Let me take you on a journey that began with a photograph, one that still haunts me to this day. By the end of this, I promise you will be looking at old photos in a whole new way. It all started at a small, dusty estate sale. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just browsing for trinkets and antiques to decorate my apartment. You know, the usual old books, some vintage furniture, maybe even an odd sculpture. But what I found that day was far from ordinary. In the back corner of a dimly lit room, tucked under a pile of forgotten relics, was an old wooden box. Its lid was cracked open slightly, and I could smell the mustiness of old paper and dust as I slid it open. Inside the box were stacks of old photographs. Most of them were faded, their edges curled with age. Faces stared back at me from long forgotten times. Strangers, smiling families, people dressed in clothes from another era. But there was one photo that caught my eye. It was a family photo of a mother, father, and two young children. But something wasn't right. At first, it seemed like any other vintage photo. But upon closer inspection, I noticed that the father's face was completely scratched out. It was almost as if someone had deliberately destroyed his image. The mother's face was partially obscured, but her eyes seemed to glow, like they were staring straight into me. And the children, there was a coldness in their eyes, a look of pure fear that made my heart race. There was no name on the back of the photo, no date. Just a faint, blurry logo of an old photography studio, one I'd never heard of before. I didn't think much of it at the time, but something told me to keep it. Something about that photo felt wrong. That night, I placed the photograph on my desk. I was intrigued, sure, but I didn't think much more about it. It was just an old photo. After all, the next morning, I woke up to a cold chill in my room. I glanced over at the desk where I had left the photo, and my heart skipped a beat. The photo was no longer where I left it. It was on the floor, face up, as though someone had moved it in the night. But who? I lived alone, and no one had been in my apartment. I picked it up and set it back on the desk, chalking it up to clumsiness. Maybe the wind had knocked it down. But as I turned to walk away, I felt it, a strange, almost paralyzing feeling of being watched. My skin prickled, and a whisper, faint but clear, seemed to come from nowhere. Look closer. I shook my head, trying to dismiss it, but the whispers didn't stop. They came every night, getting louder, more insistent, and every time I felt compelled to look at the photo again. The same whisper would follow, urging me to understand what was happening. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to know who these people were and why their faces haunted me. I started digging, researching the photography studio's logo that appeared on the back of the photo. It led me to a dead end, no records, no mention of the studio, as if it had never existed. But I didn't give up. I started looking through old newspapers, public records, anything that could give me a lead. Then, weeks later, I stumbled upon an old newspaper article buried in the archives of a local library. The article mentioned a family by the name of the Harringtons. According to the article, the family had died in a tragic fire that had completely destroyed their home in the 1950s. The parents were confirmed dead, but the two children, a boy and a girl, vanished without a trace. No one ever found them. The article mentioned that the fire had been so intense that it was nearly impossible to identify a cause. The investigation had ended in a deadlock. The case was unsolved. What really struck me, though, was the address. The fire had occurred in a house on the outskirts of the town, not far from where I had bought the photograph. I felt a chill run down my spine. Could this be the same family? Was the photograph taken before the fire? I had to see the house for myself. Armed with the information I had gathered, I decided to visit the site of the fire. The house was still there, though it looked abandoned, with boards covering the windows and vines creeping up the sides. The air around it felt heavy, like something was wrong with that place. I stepped inside, the floorboards creaking beneath my weight. The moment I crossed the threshold, the air turned icy cold. I could almost feel the presence of something or someone. I wandered through the rooms, but it wasn't until I reached the attic that things truly scaled in. Up in the attic, there was a full-length mirror, its surface covered with a thick layer of dust. As I whipped it clean, my breath caught in my throat. There, in the reflection, was the father from the photograph. His face was still blurred and scratched out, but now it looked like it was melting, as if the reflection itself was becoming distorted. It was then that I heard the whispers again, but this time they were louder, more urgent. "You have to help us." I stumbled back from the mirror, heart racing. The air felt like it was closing in on me, pressing against my chest. I had to get out of there. But before I could leave, I turned around to look at a photograph one last time. And that's when I saw something that completely shattered my world. The photograph, the one I had been carrying with me all this time, was no longer the same. The father's face had reappeared, clear as day, and his eyes were wide open, staring directly at me. But they weren't just eyes, they were pleading, filled with an unbearable sadness. And then it hit me. The photograph wasn't just a piece of the past. It was a warning about the family's unfinished business, their untold story. They were trapped, bound to the memory of that night, and somehow I had unknowingly become a part of their curse. I knew what I had to do. I had to return the photograph, place it back where I found it, and leave that house forever. But as I reached the door, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. The mirror reflected a shadow behind me, and then the whispers returned, louder and more frantic. "Help us! Help us! Help us!" I don't know what happened after that night. All I know is I left that house and never looked back, but the photograph is still with me, hidden in a drawer, waiting. So, what do you think? Was the photograph cursed? Or was I just losing my mind? If you've ever experienced something like this, I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. What do you think the photographs was trying to tell me? And if you enjoyed this mystery, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that will keep you up at night. Who knows? Maybe one day you will find a photograph that changes everything for you too.